Welcome to the Mount Pleasant Podcast, featuring discussions and interviews about the people, places, and events that make Mount Pleasant such a special place.
This is the Mount Pleasant Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Cleary, and all thanks to the great people of Mount Pleasant Magazine, I get the honor and the privilege of introducing you to Mount Pleasant, the people who make it such a special place to do business, to work, and even to live. We're introducing you to Mount Pleasant's best on the Mount Pleasant Podcast. Unique, historical, beautiful. I think those are some of the words we can use to describe the Isle of Palms. And we are going to be featuring the Isle of Palms. Mount Pleasant Magazine will in their July-August issue. So we thought this would be a great time on the Mount Pleasant Podcast to speak with the man in charge of the Isle of Palms. Mayor Phillip Pounds is with us. Mayor Pounds, thanks so much for taking the time to join our podcast today.
Absolutely, Brian. Thanks for having me. I don't know about the man in charge, but I'm at least sitting in the office. How about that?
Right. Well, you've got the position. And when you were a young boy growing up, it must have been your dream at some point saying, I'm going to be the mayor of Isle of Palms. Is that how it happened, or what was the motivation?
Yeah, pretty close to that. I can assure you, when I was making my list for post-retirement life, political career was nowhere on it, for sure. But it has been interesting. One thing led to another. And to your point, here we sit today. So, it was certainly not on a bucket or to-do list, but it's been great.
Well, what was it that made you to say, you know what, I think I can help. Let me run and perhaps become the mayor of the Isle of Palms?
Yeah. So, Brian, I started on the planning commission for the Isle of Palms before I had retired. So maybe 2016, 2017, somewhere in there. And that was kind of a nice entree into, the bigger picture, the strategic issues that are going on the island. You were able to kind of work behind the scenes on pretty large scale projects like drainage or sewer or whatever. And it was just kind of a nice taste, quite honestly, of what went on in the city. We were in Charlotte for about 25 years, and I don't know that I could have told you who the mayor was of our little town. So my involvement was, pretty slack. But so the planning commission kind of lit a fuse, so to speak, and wound up running for council in 2018, I guess it was. So was on council a couple of years before becoming mayor. And it's been interesting, Brian, the whole skill set, from my financial career. There's a lot of pieces of it that transfer over that I would not have, known that without living it for a little while now. But so it's been a good transition from, a long-term financial services career to, seeing how you can give back to the community and help out.
So, Mayor Pounds, you've been a full-time resident on the Isle of Palms since 2015. You just told us in Charlotte before that. Before we get into any issues or something, let's get introduced to you. You grew up where? Can you tell us a little bit about your family?
Sure. Born in Texas, grew up mainly in Louisiana, kind of northwest corner of Louisiana, and then wound up in Charlotte, in financial services career for 30 plus years. In what started out as First Union became Wells Fargo at the end of the day. I sat in the same seat, but they kept changing the colors on the front of the building. So my wife also just recently retired and, is taking up golf and pickleball and all the requisite pieces that you're supposed to do. We're hopefully going to be able to travel a little bit, but we've got 3 kiddos, and one just recently got married, and 1 grandson. So everybody's kind of spread out a little bit.
People may not realize, but on election night, at the end of the night, you went to bed and you had no idea whether you were mayor or not because the vote was so close.
Yeah. Take
us through that if you can a little bit, and what happened the next morning.
Sure. It's, small town America. We still post our election results on a ticker tape, if you will, on the window of our rec center. So me and the other candidate were there together with our spouses and a couple of reporters, and all doing the math and trying to figure out who won and what was what. And it was interesting, Brian. Early on, it looked like my opponent had won, and we had had a nice big hug and congratulations to each other. More votes kept coming in, and confusion reigned a little bit. But it was. It was interesting evening for sure. And it was, we knew at the end it was about, I don't know, maybe 100 votes different. But there were 20 or so provisional votes that they had kind of set aside, if you will, to count the next day or the next at the registrar of voters. So I guess it was, election was on a Tuesday. It was a Thursday, actually, when, everything got certified and finalized. So an interesting 48 hours or so for sure.
Podcast advertising is the new way to reach your best audience. Podcast advertising gives your business a voice of authority. Be heard. Advertise on one of our podcasts. Visit carolinapodcasts.com or call 843-345-7012.
You're listening to the Mount Pleasant Podcast.
Well, in these days in our nation of insurrections, election fraud, all that, hanging chads, whatever it is, can the country look at the Isle of Palms and say, we can have fair elections, and at the end of the day, we can shake hands and go home?
I think all is well on the Isle of Palms. I think we're safe. And it was interesting, the Thursday when everything finally got certified, I was in front of City Hall and doing a couple of interviews with local TV stations, and my opponent saw me and came in, and it was a really great kind of ending to an interview. Had a nice big hug, and just our relationship's fine, and everything's good on the IOP, Brian.
And it goes to show, if you don't believe it, every vote counts. This is Mount Pleasant Podcast. I'm Brian Cleary, and we're talking with the Isle of Palms Mayor Phillip Pounds. Now, Mayor Pounds, let's get to it. In these days of Republican, Democrat, left, right, liberal, conservatism, let me come lead you with the important question: Clemson or South Carolina? Where are you?
I went to a different color orange. My wife is a Clemson University graduate, so I have fully jumped on the bandwagon. I went to University of Texas, so I've got a little bit different shade, but I'm fully on the Tiger bandwagon now.
I was going to say Louisiana. You could say Tiger and then be covered either way.
Good point. That's fair.
Well, you have a unique situation here on the Isle of Palms, at least in terms of mayors, because if we talk to, say, Mayor Rainwater in Hanahan, nobody would be from Somerville saying, hey, I've got a problem with parking in your town. But obviously the Isle of Palms is a little more unique with the beaches that you have. So if you wouldn't mind, let's talk about that a little bit. And can you lead off with talking about it from the resident standpoint? Because I think maybe folks in Somerville, North Charleston, Mount Pleasant, they don't understand where the residents are coming from in terms of beach parking. Yeah,
and I think that's a great way to segue into this topic. The island, obviously a great destination for anybody in the area, and beautiful beaches and nice wide beaches and plenty of room. Brian, from a resident standpoint, we offer about 1,700 parking spots, rough numbers, on the island, and about half of those are free and half of those are paid. You may know we have a big county park here on the island as well. That's a paid parking area, but it's got lifeguards and facilities, and right at our front beach area where there's a lot of restaurants and shops and such. So from a resident view, certainly welcoming of anybody that wants to come to the island and visit for a day, a week, a month, or whatever. But there is still a very large piece of the island that's residential, and that's what we try to protect from a parking standpoint and a flow standpoint. And that's why we've tried to put our free parking along Palm Boulevard, which has about 50 or so access points to make it easy for folks to get to the beach quicker. And that's why our free parking is along Palm. So from a resident standpoint, that's where we want to keep that parking and protect the neighborhood, so people aren't running up and down our residential streets that are 20 miles an hour and kids are playing and such. So that's kind of the view from the resident standpoint.
And obviously you're the mayor of the Isle of Palms, so you're not necessarily concerned with somebody from Somerville, someone from Mount Pleasant, Goose Creek, but you're still welcoming to folks from all over the Low Country. So I guess in a way you can understand where they're coming from, but it's still the residents that are the people that you serve.
Yeah, it is. And you're right. And again, we, part of our messaging has been, the state requires us to have so much parking based on mile of beach. And the Isle of Palms provides about 8 times the required amount of parking that the state, puts out there, which is great. But, unfortunately, the island doesn't grow. Mount Pleasant, Somerville, Moncks Corner, everything grows, and that's great to be a part of a vibrant Low Country area that that's just had great success in the last 5-10 years. Pick a number, and hopefully that'll continue. But we just have to be smart around how we manage traffic flow and do what we can to make it better for everybody, not just residents, but day trippers and short-term rentals and everyone that's coming to our island.
And if I could say personally, my wife drives a 2008 Kia Sportage. It's white. It's always parked down near 49th Street, not on 49th Street, but that's where she likes to go on the beach. So I'm just
noted.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you so much.
It's funny. Back in the day, before we owned property here, we used to always park on 51st was our spot that we would always go to. And that was before the residential streets, became no for parking. But totally understand. But so noted.
So you've taken over as the mayor. You've been serving for a little bit of. If you can maybe look to us and address the major problems, the issues that you're dealing with or that you see for the Isle of Palms right now.
Yeah, and so it has been 5 months, Brian, so far. So a quick 5 months, but a very busy 5 months as well. I started off. We get sworn in early January, so one of my first actions was to meet with your mayor as well as Sullivan's Island mayor, just to start getting in front of the summer rush, if you will, and whatever we could control to put projects or things or people or resources in place to try and get in front of that summer rush. It's not a surprise that Memorial Day shows up every year and that the crowd show up right about that same time. And there aren't a lot of things in our control, Brian, but I just felt it important. I had met Mayor Haney and I had met Mayor O'Neill before, but, we didn't really have a relationship at that point. And, we both have sat down and broken bread a couple of times together and have had meetings in each other's offices, again, just trying to get in front of what we could. It's been a great partnership with those two so far, as well as the Folly Beach mayor. And then again, our work with the Department of Transportation has been good so far this year. And again, just trying to do whatever we could to make traffic flow better on or off the island. And again, to your earlier question, whether that be for residents or for day trippers or short-term rental folks, residents don't want to feel like they're trapped on weekends, even though most of us do our grocery shopping pretty early and kind of stay put for the most part. But you just learn when you can come and go on the island during the busy season for sure. So traffic was probably top of the list, quite honestly. If you've been to our marina, we've had a huge project there around our docks and a restaurant that just opened up a couple of weeks ago. That was a big focus to get that over the hump and get that done this year. So that's been the primary piece. Drainage is always, Brian, a big event on the island from when it happens, it's a big project and it costs a lot of money and it takes a lot of time. It's kind of been the other learning for me in the first 5 months, used to the corporate world. Things move pretty slow in the municipal world. But, as long as we're trending in the right direction, as long as we're moving in the right direction and, doing the things that I feel like the residents want, then, like I say, so far, so good. But those are probably the biggest items that we've tried to tackle early on in these first 5 months.
And we've talked a little bit about parking and traffic. You've gotten a little help from CARTA because, again, this summer we're looking forward to having that free beach shuttle. And I think, as the mayor and the police chief would probably agree, that's something that you hope people take advantage of. Absolutely.
And we just did a press release today with Mike Seekings, chairman of CARTA, and town center folks to announce the timing, the shuttle, the route, the times of the routes and so forth. And you're right. We've really, last year was our first year. Ridership was okay, I would say. There's been a whole year's worth of promotion. The town center folks, Mount Pleasant, again, we've been great partners with Mayor Haney and everybody on the Mount Pleasant side. It's really been, financially, we're both chipping in to cover the cost of this CARTA bus ride. So it's been great. And again, I hope this year ridership will pick up. And to your point, if we have 300 people on it this summer, that's 300 cars that haven't come over here most likely, and try to find a parking spot and get frustrated. So hopefully it'll be better use. I know Mount Pleasant has also plugged into the VRBO world and hotels there to make people aware of it. So I'm hoping ridership will have a pretty good increase this year.
This is the Mount Pleasant Podcast. I'm Brian Cleary, joined by the mayor of the Isle of Palms. Phillip Pounds joins us. The Isle of Palms is going to be featured in the upcoming July-August edition of Mount Pleasant Magazine. So, Mayor Pounds, you've got Texas, Louisiana, North Carolina in your background, Charlotte there. What was it that brought you to the Isle of Palms in the end?
It's obvious. I mean, you come over the connector and it's a magical spot for sure. We vacationed here for probably 25 plus years. My wife, when she was at Clemson in their freshman year, they started a group coming here and they did it for about 30 years. And mostly to the Isle of Palms. They bounced around a little bit, but this has been our vacation spot for sure. It's a quick trip from Charlotte. Never really thought we would have the opportunity to own property and much less make it a full-time home for us. But, recession happened in 07, 08 and was able to get a piece of property. And then my wife and I both wound up changing jobs and eventually retiring. And here we are 7 or 8 years later.
So you mentioned the fact that you talked down 51st Street. So obviously you're a beach person. Boogie board, you just lay on the beach. Do you ride the waves? What is it that the mayor does in terms of the Isle of Palms Beach?
Depends on which part of the family's here with us. If it's just my wife and I, it is absolutely our haven from a reading or walking or hanging out standpoint. If the grandson's here, you're in the water kind of doing whatever needs to happen from a boogie board or going back and forth between the beach and the pool all day long and somewhere along the snack shop as well. But if it's just my wife and I, it is very much a recluse, quiet, reading, walking spot for us.
So as the mayor of Isle of Palms, you're the biggest cheerleader for the IOP as well. Tell me one or two things that people maybe don't realize about the Isle of Palms or things that you really would want to highlight in terms of, hey, here's a good reason why you want to visit and maybe even decide to live here.
Yeah. I think it's a nice sized community, Brian, about 4,000 residents, give or take. Some really good restaurants on the island. A lot of folks, to your point, may come over and day trip, with their own cooler and just kind of be in and out. But some really good restaurants, some good options that are available here for sure. Again, the 7 miles of beach roughly that we have is you can't replace that anywhere. And that's the best part of the IOP to me.
And speaking of restaurants, being from Louisiana, Texas, you've got some different culinary tastes that you've had. Is there good crawfish on the Isle of Palms? Where's your go-to place?
It's funny you mentioned that because my wife and I, my wife was born in Texas, but she doesn't have a Louisiana connection. But, we had not really found a Creole place anywhere around hardly. And it's funny, the mayor of Sullivan's, Pat O'Neill, is also from Louisiana. So he and I had compared notes one day. So we finally stumbled upon one in Park Circle that's really pretty darn good and very authentic. On the island, crawfish is not a thing. Creole is not so much a thing, but there's plenty of other good options to take care of your need.
I hope then shrimp has become a part of your diet since moving here.
Absolutely. Shrimp and grits kind of becomes the bogey taste test just about anywhere you go. So
here's something that you may want to avoid talking about it, which I would understand, but I kind of have to bring it up since it's been in the papers and stuff. But the secession effort on the Isle of Palms, seceding from the state of South Carolina. Care to comment on that at all?
Yeah, the only comment I would have, in no way, shape, or form am I or the city involved. Brian, my focus has been on building relationships and making sure we have good collaboration with folks that we need, like Mount Pleasant, like Sullivan's, like Department of Transportation or other state legislators. To me, a stick is not necessarily the way to get things done, particularly in a municipal world where, things move pretty slow and it takes a lot of time to get things to happen. So I'm much more focused on, making sure our partnerships are good, making sure relationships are going in the right direction. Throwing a bomb in the middle of the room is not my style by any stretch. So that's all I'll probably say about that.
Fair enough. You were a member of the Planning Commission. A lot of people don't know because maybe they just come to Isle of Palms and most of their time is spent on Palm Boulevard. But if you make a little left turn and go back to the rec center, the Isle of Palms really has a very nice recreation center there, and a lot of events happen there. There's a lot going on for residents. Yeah,
good point. There's probably 3 pieces of city-owned property. Rec center is certainly one. It's a great jewel right in the middle of the island that serves mostly island folks, between us and Sullivan's, as well as a lot of Mount Pleasant folks that come over for classes or whatever. The marina is actually city-owned property that's, again, a jewel right on the water. And then we've got 2 municipal lots right down by Front Beach where we have about 400 parking spots that we have left undeveloped at this point. We may look at some options in the future. But you're right, the rec center is just a great piece of property that, we have farmers markets there and kids soccer and baseball and just about anything else you want to have. It's really a nice spot. You're right.
So after 5 months in office, you were part of the planning commission, so you have a little bit of knowledge and background and things like that. Take us a little bit into the future. What do you see happening on the Isle of Palms? Mostly, what would you like to positively see happen on the Isle?
Yeah. And Brian, I think, again, this whole traffic and parking is going to be a constant for us without a doubt. And every year there's not going to be, new things that you can do from a flow standpoint, but, we will continue to work with our Department of Transportation friends and anybody else in the community that, can help out or change things for us. Drainage is always top of our list for sure. And I want to make sure we continue to push the ball on that. We have some hot spots definitely around the island, that we need to take care of. We just kicked off this month, 2 really big projects on the island that'll take, 6 months to a year to complete from a construction standpoint. So I want to make sure, I don't want to take my eye off the ball by any stretch, but, so some of the basic blocking and tackling like transportation flow and drainage, sewer is a big thing too on the island. I just want to make sure we can keep trending in the right direction and stay in front of what we can from a drainage standpoint. I've got a number of things on my whiteboard that, are focuses for me. And we've introduced some of those already in council in the first 5 months of this year, and we'll hopefully get those to fruition before the year gets out. But, I think the issues on the Isle of Palms, to your question, mostly stay the same because it's typically traffic, parking, drainage, sewer. But you're just trying to be sure you can maintain that quality of life for our residents as well as our visitors, and that everybody can coexist in a great way.
So Mayor Pounds, you mentioned the fact that you're retired and you'd like to get some travel time. I know the mayor's got to get a week, maybe 2 weeks vacation during the year.
Maybe,
if you were heading out somewhere, where would that be?
We've had a couple of times scheduled, pre-COVID, to do a Greek Isle tour that we would still like to pull off at some point. My wife spent a fair amount, some of her growing up years in Luxembourg. So she's kind of been all over the place, but it was through the eyes of a teenager. So we've done, Italy and France and London and Ireland and Scotland, which has all been great. But, Spain's on the list, Portugal's on the list, and definitely the Greek Isle probably would be our next trip that we do out of the country.
I don't know. I hear Orangeburg and Myrtle Beach are nice this time of year as well. Just throwing it out there.
I'm with you. I hear you. I get it. Yeah.
Mayor Phillip Pounds with the Isle of Palms. If a constituent is watching or listening to our podcast and would like to get a hold of you in some way or speak with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Best way to do that, I am in the office. I have stated office hours a couple of days a week. I'm usually here every day, but they can go on our website and find out exactly what those days are. I do a coffee once a month, last Friday of every month, that is just open to the public and whoever would like to come. My email address, my cell phone numbers on our website, iop.net, that is easily accessible. So I try to make it as easy as possible and different venues and different ways. So hopefully people's needs are getting met.
We will, in the pages of Mount Pleasant Magazine, be focused on the Isle of Palms in the July-August issue. So you'll want to check that out. And Mayor Phillip Pounds, thank you so much for joining us today on the Mount Pleasant podcast. Absolutely,
Brian. Thank you again. Look forward to the article.
And I look forward to seeing you, not only you, Mayor, but everyone, because love the Isle of Palm Beach. My wife and I are there every weekend in the summer, and we hope to see you there. And we thank you again for listening and watching to the Mount Pleasant podcast.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks for spending your time with the Mount Pleasant podcast, your community, your podcast. Listen to past and future episodes at mountpleasantpodcast.com.